Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom wrapped in mist and melody, there lived a couple who longed for a child more than anything in the world. Their small wooden cottage stood beside a tall wall, beyond which grew a garden unlike any other. In that garden, flowers glowed like jewels, trees whispered in the wind, and the air shimmered with the quiet pulse of magic. But it belonged to a powerful sorceress named Mother Gothel. Every day, the woman gazed through her window at that enchanted garden. She saw roses red as fire, lilies white as snow, and a strange green plant that shimmered under the moonlight. It was called Rampion, or Rapunzel. She could not explain why, but her heart longed for it with unbearable desire. As days passed, her craving grew so strong that she became pale and weak. Her husband, frightened for her health, begged her to eat something else, but she only shook her head and whispered, "If I do not taste that rampion, I shall surely die." One night, driven by love and fear, her husband crept into the witch's garden. The air was heavy and still, the moon hiding behind clouds. His hands trembled as he picked a few leaves of rampion and rushed back home. His wife ate them greedily, and at once, her face lit up with joy and color. But her desire returned again and again, stronger each time, and soon he found himself stealing into the garden night after night. On the third night, as he turned to leave, a shadow moved in the darkness. The air grew cold. Mother Gothel appeared before him, her eyes gleaming like sharp glass. "How dare you steal from me?" she hissed. The man fell to his knees and begged for forgiveness, explaining that his wife was sick and he only wanted to save her. Gothel stood silent for a moment, then smiled, a slow, cold smile. "Very well," she said softly. "You may keep the leaves. But in return, the life that grows inside your wife's womb shall belong to me." Terrified, the man could not speak. He nodded, knowing he had no power against her. Months later, a baby girl was born, her hair shone like threads of pure gold, brighter than the sun. Mother Gothel appeared in the doorway, cloaked in shadow, and without a word took the child into her arms. "Her name shall be Rapunzel," she said, and vanished into the forest. Rapunzel grew into a beautiful, curious child, full of laughter and wonder. But Gothel feared the world would take her away. When the girl turned 12, Gothel built a tall tower deep in the forest, a tower with no door and no stairs, only a single window high above. There she kept Rapunzel hidden from the world. The only way in or out was through her long golden hair. Whenever Gothel came to visit, she would stand beneath the window and call, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The golden braid would fall like sunlight, and Gothel would climb it, her black cloak sweeping behind her. Inside the tower, Rapunzel spent her days singing, painting, and reading the few books Gothel allowed her. She watched the birds fly across the blue sky and wondered what lay beyond the forest. One evening, she asked softly, "Mother Gothel, what's outside these woods? I hear birds that never come close, and I see lights in the sky that flicker like fire." Gothel frowned and replied sharply, "The world beyond is cruel, full of thieves and heartbreak. Stay safe, my child. Stay here where I can protect you." Rapunzel lowered her eyes and said nothing. But every night, when Gothel was gone, she would whisper to herself, "Someday, I will see the world." Years passed, and her hair grew longer and longer, reaching down the tower wall. Her songs became her only friends, filling the forest with her voice. One day, as she sang a tune of freedom and dreams, a young prince riding through the woods heard her voice. It floated through the trees like sunlight through leaves. He stopped his horse, listening in awe. "What voice is this?" he whispered. "So pure, so lonely." He followed the sound until he came upon a hidden clearing, and there, half covered in ivy, stood the tall tower. He looked around but saw no door, no entrance, only a window high above. He waited and soon saw a figure cloaked in dark green approach the tower. It was Mother Gothel. She stood below the window and called out in a cold voice, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The prince hid behind a tree and watched as a long golden braid fell from the window. Gothel caught it, wrapped it around her arm, and began to climb. The prince could hardly believe his eyes. So that's how she reaches her, he thought. When the witch left again, he waited until nightfall. Under the light of the moon, he stepped forward, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. Standing where Gothel had stood, he called softly, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The window opened, and a golden braid fell. The prince climbed up carefully, his hands burning, his heart racing. When he reached the window, he pulled himself inside, and found himself face to face with a young woman whose hair shimmered like sunlight and whose eyes were wide with surprise. "Oh," she gasped. "You're not Mother Gothel. Who are you?" The prince smiled gently. "Forgive me," he said. "I heard your voice while traveling through the woods. It was so beautiful that I had to find where it came from." Rapunzel blinked, unsure whether to be afraid or curious. "You climbed up my hair?" she asked in disbelief. "That must have hurt." The prince laughed softly. "It was worth every tangle," he said. They talked for hours. He told her stories of the world outside, of mountains that touched the clouds, oceans that glowed beneath the moon, cities filled with music and laughter. Rapunzel listened with shining eyes. Everything he described felt like a dream she had always known but never seen. She asked him question after question, her voice filled with wonder. "Is it true that people can walk freely under the stars? That they can see the sunrise from the ground?" The prince nodded. "And you will too, one day. You don't belong in this tower, Rapunzel. You belong where the wind can touch your face." When he finally left that night, Rapunzel stood at the window long after he had gone. For the first time in her life, the world below seemed alive, calling to her. She whispered, "Maybe one day, I will see it with my own eyes." The witch carried the baby deep into the forest, where sunlight barely touched the ground. There, hidden behind vines and moss, stood a tall, lonely tower. It had no doors, only a single window high above. The witch raised the baby there, away from the world, whispering spells to keep the place hidden from wandering eyes. She named her Rapunzel, after the stolen herb that had caused her birth. Years passed, and Rapunzel grew into a beautiful girl with golden hair that shimmered like sunlight. Her laughter filled the tower and echoed through the trees, making birds sing back to her. But she had never stepped outside, not even once. Her world was only walls, books, and the small window that opened to the endless sky. Every morning, Rapunzel looked out and whispered, "Someday, I'll see the world beyond the clouds." She dreamed of rivers, flowers, and faces she had never seen. But her dreams were interrupted each day by the same cold voice, the witch's. Whenever the witch arrived, she would stand below the tower and call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And Rapunzel would lower her long, golden braid, which shone like silk threads in the sun. The witch would climb it slowly, warning her again and again. "The world outside is cruel, my dear. People will hurt you. They will use your beauty. Stay here, and you'll be safe." Rapunzel believed her, for a while. But her heart was restless. Each sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, and she wondered what lay beyond those colors. She began to collect small things that drifted through her window, feathers, petals, and even a lost bird once. She would talk to them, dreaming that they could carry her messages to the world below. One day, as she combed her long hair near the window, she heard something unusual, a melody. A soft, sweet song floated through the forest. It was unlike the witch's harsh chanting, it was gentle, human, and full of wonder. Rapunzel leaned out and saw a young man on horseback, following the sound of his lute. He looked up, startled, for he had never seen such golden light before. Her hair glowed like a halo against the fading sun. He called softly, "Is someone there?" Startled, Rapunzel hid behind the curtains. Her heart raced. For the first time, another human voice, kind and warm, had spoken to her. The witch's words echoed in her mind, "The world is dangerous." But something inside her whispered, "It can't be all evil." That voice was full of life. That night, Rapunzel couldn't sleep. The stars outside seemed to wink at her, as if urging her to take a step toward freedom. The next day, the prince returned. He came quietly, hiding his horse among the trees. From behind the vines, he watched as the witch called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." He saw the impossible, a cascade of golden hair falling from the window, long enough to climb. The witch went up and disappeared. When she left, the prince waited until nightfall. Then, taking a deep breath, he called out in the same tone, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." To his amazement, the braid came down. Rapunzel, thinking it was the witch, waited patiently until a different face appeared through the window. "Who are you?" she gasped. The prince smiled gently. "Don't be afraid. I heard your song, and I had to see who sang with such light." Rapunzel stepped back, her heart torn between fear and curiosity. "You shouldn't be here. The witch will." He interrupted softly, "If your witch truly loved you, would she keep you locked away from the world?" Her lips trembled. No one had ever questioned that before. For the first time, Rapunzel felt the truth sting like sunlight after a long shadow. They talked for hours. He told her about villages, rivers, mountains, and stars reflected in the lakes. Rapunzel listened like a child hearing life for the first time. When dawn came, he promised, "I'll return tomorrow. I'll bring you something from the real world." And he did. Each day, he brought little gifts, a flower, a ribbon, a loaf of bread, a story. Slowly, Rapunzel's fear turned to joy. She began to laugh again, and her laughter reached the forest birds, who once more sang her name. Days passed in peace. The witch noticed a strange sparkle in Rapunzel's eyes. Something had changed. The girl who once sang only to the birds now hummed love songs she had never been taught. Her laughter was lighter, her gaze brighter. The witch, though old and wicked, was not a fool. "Rapunzel," she said one morning, her tone soft but sharp beneath, "why do you look happier these days? Has the world outside called your name?" Rapunzel, startled, shook her head quickly, but her trembling hands betrayed her. The witch's heart darkened. She smelled a secret in the air that evening. As the sun sank behind the forest, the witch whispered an ancient spell to the wind. Her form melted into the shadows, and she hid beneath the trees, waiting. Soon, the prince arrived, his horse silent as moonlight. He gazed up and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The golden braid fell like a river of light. The witch's eyes widened. So, it was true. A man had entered her tower, her sacred prison of control. Her rage began to boil, but she stayed silent, watching him climb, every heartbeat pounding with fury. When the prince reached the top, he found Rapunzel waiting with a smile that could melt the stars. "I brought you roses," he said softly. "From the world you've never seen." But before she could take them, a cold voice pierced the room. "How touching." The witch stepped from the shadows. Her eyes glowed red like burning coal. Rapunzel gasped, dropping the roses. The petals scattered across the floor, red like blood. The prince drew his sword, but the witch only laughed, a laugh that shook the tower walls. "You think your love can break my spell?" she hissed. "Then let me show you what true pain feels like." With a single wave of her hand, the witch's magic swirled through the room. Rapunzel cried out as the witch's clawed fingers grabbed her braid, the same golden hair that once carried dreams. "You will never see him again," she screamed. In one cruel motion, she cut the hair. The braid fell to the ground like a piece of her soul. Rapunzel collapsed, tears streaming down her face. The witch's heart, once human, felt no pity. She dragged Rapunzel from the tower and cast her into the dark forest far away, where no prince could ever find her. When the witch returned, she tied Rapunzel's severed braid to the window and waited. As night fell, the prince came once more, calling out the familiar words. The hair dropped down. He climbed, smiling, unaware of the trap. But as he reached the top, the witch appeared. Looking for your love, she snarled. The prince froze. Before he could escape, the witch released the braid. He fell from the tower, crashing into the thorns below. His cry echoed through the forest as darkness swallowed him. His eyes, once bright with hope, were blinded by the sharp thorns. The witch looked down, her laughter echoing into the night. The tower was silent again. No laughter, no songs, only the whisper of wind through empty halls. The witch sat by the window, holding the golden hair in her hand, but instead of victory, she felt hollow. Rapunzel was gone. The prince was broken. The world had grown darker. And somewhere far away, a lonely girl wept beneath the moonlight, her heart aching not for freedom, but for the one voice that once called her name with love. Rapunzel awoke on the cold, wet ground of an endless forest. Her head ached, her hands were bruised, and her heart felt heavier than the night sky above. Around her, only the sound of rustling leaves and distant thunder filled the silence. Her golden hair, once long and full of magic, was gone. She touched the ends, rough and uneven, and tears filled her eyes. I am nothing now, she whispered to the wind. But the wind did not answer. The stars hid behind the clouds, as if mourning with her. Days passed. Rapunzel wandered through the forest barefoot, hungry, cold, and frightened. She ate wild berries, drank rainwater from leaves, and slept under fallen trees. Sometimes she sang to herself, but her voice, once bright, now trembled like a lost child's cry. Yet, even in her despair, something inside her refused to die. Each sunrise felt like a small victory. She began to learn which plants were safe, which paths led to rivers, and how to weave grass into shelter. The tower had taken her freedom, but the forest began to teach her strength. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Rapunzel sat beside a stream. She dipped her hands in the cool water and saw her reflection. Her face was pale, her eyes tired, but there was still a spark there. Maybe my hair was never my power, she whispered. Maybe, it was me all along. She began to hum softly, the same melody she once sang in the tower. The trees seemed to listen. The water rippled in rhythm. For the first time since her exile, Rapunzel smiled. She had found a new kind of magic, the courage within her heart. Weeks later, Rapunzel discovered a small valley filled with gentle people, farmers, shepherds, and children who had never heard her name. They took her in with kindness. She helped them plant seeds, gather herbs, and tell stories by the fire. Her voice, though humble, brought peace to their nights. They called her the Golden Girl of the Forest. They didn't know her past, and she never told them. For a while, she lived quietly, learning what it meant to belong without fear. Yet every night, when she looked at the stars, she whispered a prayer for the prince who had once promised her the world. One night, as she slept beside the fire, Rapunzel dreamed of him. She saw the prince walking through darkness, calling her name. His hands reached out, his eyes covered in shadows. Rapunzel, he whispered. Where are you? She awoke in tears, clutching her chest. Deep down, she knew he was still alive, broken, perhaps, but breathing. The bond between their hearts had not faded. In that moment, she decided, if fate had kept them apart, then she would challenge fate itself. At dawn, Rapunzel packed a small basket of bread and water. She hugged the villagers goodbye, thanking them for their kindness. Then she began to walk, not knowing where the path would lead, but certain of what she sought. Each step was guided by faith, by love, by hope. The forest no longer frightened her. The birds seemed to sing for her again. I will find you, she whispered into the wind. No matter how far, no matter how dark, I will find you. As she walked into the distance, the light of the setting sun wrapped around her like a golden veil. She was no longer the frightened girl in the tower, she was a woman reborn through pain, strength, and love. Somewhere beyond the horizon, destiny waited, a destiny that would test her once more, but also heal what had been broken. The prince awoke in a world of shadows. The thorns had blinded him, blood stained his hands. He called Rapunzel's name, but only the echo of his voice returned. He stumbled through the forest, each step heavy with sorrow. "I've lost her," he whispered, "and I can no longer see the light." Yet within his heart, a faint warmth flickered, the memory of her laughter, her songs, her golden hair shining like the sun. It was that memory that kept him alive. For days, the prince wandered across valleys and rivers, guided only by sound and smell. He ate roots and drank from streams, refusing to give up. The world that once bowed to his crown now tested his soul. His fine clothes were torn, his hands were rough. But in his blindness, he saw more than he ever had before. He saw kindness in the voices of strangers, felt beauty in the warmth of sunlight. "The eyes of the heart," he said softly one night, "see what the eyes of the face cannot." One morning, while resting near a quiet meadow, the prince heard a sound, faint but familiar. A melody floating through the wind. He froze. That voice, it couldn't be. He turned his face toward the sound, tears already rising. "Rapunzel?" he whispered. The song stopped for a moment, then continued, trembling with emotion. It was her. The air around him shimmered with hope. Weak and trembling, he began to follow the sound, step by step, as though his heart itself were guiding him home. Rapunzel was gathering herbs near the stream when she felt a strange pull. As if the wind carried her name. She turned, and there he was, stumbling through the trees, blind but smiling through tears. "Rapunzel," he called, falling to his knees. She ran to him, her heart pounding, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My prince," she cried, wrapping her arms around him. The world seemed to pause. Time itself held its breath. Two souls broken by fate were whole again. Rapunzel held his face in her hands and wept. Her tears, pure, born of love, fell onto his eyes. A soft light began to glow. The prince blinked, once, twice, and suddenly, the shadows lifted. For the first time in years, he saw her. Not the tower girl of his memory, but a woman strong and radiant. "I can see you," he whispered. "I never truly stopped seeing you." They both laughed and cried, their voices echoing like music across the valley. The curse was broken. Together they journeyed back toward the prince's kingdom. Along the way, the people who saw them whispered tales of miracle and love. "That is Rapunzel," they said. "The girl who found her prince with nothing but faith." When they reached the castle, bells rang and flowers rained from balconies. The kingdom rejoiced, for not only had their prince returned, but he brought with him a legend of courage that would be told for generations. That night, Rapunzel stood on the castle balcony, her short hair glowing in the moonlight. The prince came beside her, took her hand, and whispered, "The tower was never your prison, it was the beginning of your wings." She smiled. "And you," she said softly, "were the reason I learned to fly." They watched the stars together, two hearts that had walked through darkness, and now stood forever in the light. Morning sunlight poured through the windows of the royal palace. Rapunzel walked barefoot through the gardens, where flowers danced in the breeze. She bent to touch a golden blossom, the same rare herb her mother once longed for. "It all began with this," she whispered, smiling. "And it all led here." The curse, the pain, the years of isolation, all had shaped her into something greater. She was no longer the helpless girl of the tower. She was a queen of her own destiny. Rapunzel and the prince ruled with kindness. They opened the castle gates to the poor, built homes for the lost, and filled every hall with music. Children came to hear Rapunzel's stories, and when she sang, the kingdom grew silent. Her voice, though no longer magical, healed every heart. "My power was never in my hair," she told them. "It was in my heart, and you all have the same power inside you." Far away, in a lonely cave, the old witch watched from her mirror. She saw Rapunzel's joy, the prince's love, the peace that had returned. For the first time, she felt something strange, regret. The mirror cracked, and as it shattered, her magic vanished into dust. She whispered, "Perhaps love was the truest magic after all." And with that, the darkness that had ruled her heart for so long finally faded away. Every year, the kingdom celebrated the festival of freedom. Thousands of lanterns rose into the night sky, each one carrying a wish. Rapunzel and the prince stood hand in hand, watching the glowing lights drift into the heavens. "Once, I dreamed of seeing the world," she said softly. "Now the world is here, shining with us." The prince smiled. "And it will shine as long as love does." Years passed. The story of Rapunzel became a legend, told to children as a tale of hope, courage, and freedom. Some said her songs could still be heard in the wind, especially when someone felt lost. And whenever people saw golden light touch the hills at sunset, they whispered, "Rapunzel's heart still watches over us." As the story closes, imagine her voice, soft, timeless, carried by the wind. "Do not fear your tower. It is only a chapter, not your end. Even in the darkest place, there is always a door that leads to light. You just have to find the courage to open it." And so, Rapunzel finally found her freedom, not just from the tower, but from fear, from loneliness, and from the lies that once kept her caged. Her golden hair may have been cut, but her courage only grew stronger. Because true beauty was never in her hair, it was in her heart. Now, if this story touched your heart even a little, please, take a moment to support us. Every single video on Everbright Storytime is made with love, sleepless nights, and countless hours of effort, just to bring you a world full of hope, courage, and imagination. Your one like, one comment, and one subscribe, it truly means the world to us. It gives us the strength to create more stories that make you smile, dream, and believe again. So, if you felt something today, if Rapunzel's journey lit even a small spark of hope in you, then please, become a part of our little story family. Because your support isn't just a click, it's a promise that stories like this will never fade. This is Everbright Storytime, where every story shines a little light in your heart.